Next item of discussions in regards to Sertoma, the Little League football program. A couple things for the board's information. Just as a reminder to the board, of course I know you know this, this board had instructed the attorney Donna Shoemate to actually write a letter to the Commissioner of Insurance in regards to some of the points of discussion at the last meeting. Specifically, there was concern in regards to 2 liability insurance policies, and then also sports accidental insurance. Those are really the 3 policies that was being discussed. And so just let the board know that the letter was sent to the Commissioner of Insurance February 10th. Basically, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll just read it so that everybody will know what is being asked. This is from Donna Shoemate, and she states, this is written to Wayne Goodwin, Commissioner of Insurance. And she basically states, Dear Mr. Goodwin, I represent the Board of County Commissioners of Alleghany County at the February 3rd, 2012 meeting. Members of the public called into question the validity of certain insurance policies. Specifically, it was alleged that the National Casualty Company policy number 409-49-71131, I think that's it, and Grain Dealers Mutual Policy number, I'll just skip the number, do not exist. I'm closing the certificates of liability insurance for each policy. So we also sent in copies of those liability policies. The next paragraph also reads, the Board of County Commissioners directed me to write you to ask for your assistance in investigating these allegations. In addition, the board seeks verification that the nationwide sports accident insurance policy number XXX also exists, and that it provides excess medical coverage due to injury while engaged in football sporting event. Although the majority of the conversation was on that liability issue, I basically, there was some question about the accident policy, not necessarily whether or not it exists, but whether or not it was properly applied for. So I just went ahead and instructed Donna, let's just ask about all 3. Alleghany County Recreation collects money from participants and forwards the premiums to Moore Moxley Insurance Agency. I'm enclosing a letter from Nationwide, the purchase order from Alleghany County, the invoice from Moore Moxley Insurance Agency, and the Alleghany County check stubs and the invoice amount. So in essence, those are the things that we sent copies of to the Department of Insurance, or to the Insurance Commissioner. We have not heard back. That's something that maybe I can have Donna follow up next week, but just let you know that has been sent off. Also, just for the board's information, for the public's information, Ms. Shoemate is in court in Yadkin County and just could not get out. She tried to make this meeting, but that's why she's not here. If this meeting is extended, she said she'd try to get back here by lunchtime, but she'll just do the best she can. The next part of the discussion here is that I'd like to talk a little bit about insurance, and if the board would indulge me a little bit. I think one thing that's become apparent to me is in a lot of these conversations, we're confusing insurances. We're confusing what insurance is supposed to do what and who's supposed to be covered, and not at anybody's fault, but I just thought it'd be imperative for parents to understand how our insurance works. And I'm going to step away from Sertoma, because Sertoma generally works like our other program, or it's supposed to work like our other programs. But let's talk about basketball for a second. Alleghany County does lead its own basketball program, in which our kids play against each other. They play at the high school, and they play at the elementary gyms and things of that nature. When a parent comes in and signs up their child for basketball, they do pay Alleghany County a sign-up fee, and then they sign the bottom. They give us the information on their child, and then they sign the bottom of the application itself. What we do is we do buy excess medical insurance. It's through Nationwide. It's the exact same are the exact type of policy that we've asked the insurance commissioner to look into for Sertoma. And for basketball, for example, we purchased $10,000 worth of excess insurance. This is medical accident insurance, okay? It is not primary, it is secondary. So if your child has insurance, health insurance, that will be primary if your child gets hurt. That's how this works. Then Alleghany County, so that's the additional insurance we purchase, is excess medical insurance to help cover if anybody gets hurt. For the board's information too, through this policy, because we league amongst ourselves, what is also covered under this, we pay premiums just for the players, but under the $10,000 medical excess, all players, managers, coaches, cheerleaders, officers, official volunteers of the league itself. If the entire league of teams is insured, which that's what we do with basketball, then the umpires, scorers, timers, safety officers, things of that nature. So that excess medical insurance that we purchase through Nationwide covers those individuals. Again, but it's excess, it's not primary. If they have their own insurance, that would be primary. But where I think a lot of people get confused on is the liability side of it. Now, Alleghany County we have liability insurance. We fill out in our application that we run a recreation department, and it does cover us for general liability. But I think where people may or may not get confused is because we have general liability insurance doesn't necessarily mean it covers medically everything that may occur on the basketball court. And again, I'm talking about basketball now. And so, for example, the application that a parent fills out, and my child plays basketball, so when I was out there at practice, I was just kind of sitting around asking people, do you actually read did you read the bottom where you signed your child up? And predominantly most parents told me no, they're just signing their child up. So this is why I'd like for everybody to understand that when they sign their child up through recreation, they're generally signing a statement that reads something like this. This is actually for Dixie League, but we know that participation in baseball or softball may result in serious injury and protective equipment that does not prevent all injuries to players, and do hereby waive, release, absolve, indemnify, and agree to hold harmless to the local and regional Dixie League, the organizers, sponsors, supervisors, participants, persons transporting to and from activities, claim arising injury to my child, whether the result of negligence or any other cause. Then they also agree to absolve Alleghany County from this too. Now, the reason I want to point this out is, let's use for examples basketball, okay? A child is running up and down the court, and during the normal course of play, they injure themselves, okay? And they have no medical insurance, that's what the medical insurance is for. The excess is to help pay for that injury. But if they injure themselves past the $10,000, it's not automatic that our liability insurance is going to come in and pay for that. We have to be at fault at something, if that makes any sense. Alleghany County has to be at fault. Now, I'm going to use extremes. If there's a big hole in the middle of the basketball court, okay, well, first of all, the school would be involved in that because they own the facility, but they have liability insurance. Alleghany County would have some potential liability because we allowed a league to be playing on a court with a big hole in it. And then, ultimately, our liability insurance company would come in and potentially pay that. But I think there is some confusion out there that Alleghany County is covering all parents under all circumstances of everything that could potentially happen to their children, when the reality is you're assuming some risk. And I felt like that I need to let everybody know this. I'm not saying this to be mean or rude or whatnot, but I think it was becoming very apparent when I was just talking to some parents that they may not understand they're assuming some risk themselves by allowing their child to play. And the reason I wanted to point that out, because we're confusing medical versus liability, okay? And there's some assumption that liability would step in and protect, would pay for every incident that could happen to the kid. All right, we can use other examples. Just so you know, since we do run the league, you know, we do have coaches fall under our liability policy, so that would be covered. If the coach was negligent or did something to the kid, then that would fall. Our liability policy does cover that. We could sit here for hours and go through the thousands of different scenarios that could happen. But I just want parents to understand, and in a lot of those scenarios, our liability would step in and help pay for whatever occurred. But I do just think the public and parents need to understand, by the sheer fact of you signing up and allowing your child to participate, depending upon what the circumstance is, you are assuming some responsibility and liability for allowing your child to go out there. That doesn't mean that Alleghany County is not covered. It doesn't mean we don't protect if our volunteers or people that are out on the fields participating does something wrong, we would be covered under that circumstance. But generally speaking, I just wanted to make that statement. I believe parents need to read what they sign. Now, we all know, just because they sign this, it doesn't mean that they couldn't sue us. I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you what our liability insurance company, how they're going to view it. They're going to view it as if it's a normal course of play, and if Alleghany County or its representatives weren't at fault, then it's going to be between the parent and our liability insurance company. Now, the reason I want to point that out is, let's now go back to Sertoma. Okay? We do have, when it talks about insurance, obviously we got the letter out to the insurance commissioner to investigate whether or not all those insurances were valid or not valid. Okay? And we will find that out, I guess, at their rate. But I do want to send a message out to parents and people who have allowed their child to play Sertoma football. There was some impression that Alleghany County was somehow or another out there just completely exposed because these other insurance policies may or may not be valid. Let me start off by saying, first of all, they should have been valid. We paid them. By no means am I saying that those insurance policies should not have been in place. But in the worst case scenario, they weren't in place. What I'm telling you is, because of the sheer nature of us working a recreation, a recreation department, because we list our recreation department under our liability, under our workers' comp for volunteers, things of that nature, Alleghany County was not exposed to any more liability than the other sports that we participate in. All right. Now, I think it's very important when we get these insurance policies validated that that the excess medical gets validated, because that gets a little bit more complicated in the statement I just made. But at the end of the day, the sheer nature of this program being ran through our recreation department, even though we were kind of half in and half out, our umbrella, I've had conversations with our insurance companies. I know how I list out our insurance when we apply for it. Alleghany County was not exposed to any more liability than any other sport that we run. And then finally, the last thing on Sertoma is really coming down to the actions or potential actions of this board and the county. You know, ultimately, what I'd stated to this board previously is really the question before this board and the question for the county is whether or not Alleghany County has any staff involved in the Sertoma League. You know, without repeating myself, this has incrementally, our involvement, Alleghany County's involvement has incrementally increased through the years due to volunteer-based dwindling, things of that nature. We've sort of half ran it, half participated in it, and somewhat relied on the Sertoma board and other volunteers to run the other half. So now where we're at is is I feel like there's really three choices when we start talking about the county's participation potential in Sertoma. One is to allow David Evans and the staff to continue working with the Sertoma organization. That's a Yadkinville-based organization. Two would be to allow recreation staff to work with this new league that's being formed. Or three is basically just get out of the Little League football program altogether. Really, I can't as a manager say that any three of those choices are at this point, you know, the best choices, because we have Sertoma where there's a lot of questions still out there. We've got the insurance issue that's being investigated. I think there's still other issues that the Sertoma board is looking at, and that we have citizens who have issues with or complaints about how money may or may not have been handled, or equipment and things of that nature. So it's hard for me to say that I could recommend to allow our staff to still participate in that league. As far as the new league, you know, I've spent a lot of time, you know, I have talked to Tracy and I've talked to Kevin, and I understand what is attempting to be formed at this point. I think there's a lot of good concepts that they're talking about. The concepts like transparency and working on a regional basis for transparency, trying to keep all the money local. I think all those are grand and good concepts and ideas, but the real issue that we have here is that it's hard for me to say half in and half out, because if you're asking for Alleghany County to be able to run or participate in this and stand up to what I would call governmental public scrutiny accountability, okay, then I don't feel comfortable sending our rec director out who's going to have to rely on volunteers to collect money at the gate, or who's going to have to rely on other volunteers if he's going to be held to a standard that's what I would call public scrutiny accountability. From that perspective, I would almost have to start presenting you with a plan that we were going to have to staff these people. You know, right now, we're not paying for this staff, so it's hard to control that staff or to put rules and things of that nature for governmental accountability. So at this point, I can't say that I could recommend that county staff be involved in the new league. Now, if this new league got formed and they were really operating and they came and presented a plan, and who knows for the future, but I'm talking about right now. And as of right now, it's hard for me to recommend county staff being involved with that. So unfortunately, where I'm at is, as far as county staff, rep director, county employees, I can't see any other choice but to just say and recommend to this board that we turn it back over to the volunteers completely, and have the volunteers run this program. And Mr. Chairman and other commissioners, I'll turn it over for discussions or questions.
And if we pursue the third option that you laid out there, our insurance policy would not be in effect. The schools might be, because they play on school property, but it would no longer include any liability to the county if we dissolve ourselves from, as the third option you outlined.
Yeah, our insurance company, if we're not controlling it, finding the volunteers, if it's not county staff doing that, then no, our liability insurance will not cover Sertoma.
Now, there is also a local, or an Alleghany Sertoma board, who has been investigating or listening to the same things that we've been listening to. They're the final decision as far as whether to participate or continue with Sertoma.
I don't know if you'd call it the final decision maker. I mean, it's not really an actual board. They don't have a not-for-profit number. There's nothing that says that anybody can't go out and form their own league. I do think that the Sertoma board is trying to work with Mr. Bottomley and Mr. Spurlin. I think the last Sertoma board meeting that was held was last week. I think everybody was in agreement that you really don't want to try to split the Little League up, even if the county's not involved. I think that was at least, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, if that wasn't one of the things that at least was agreed upon before we left was not to try to split up Little League. I think right now the more complicated factor for Sertoma is 7th and 8th grade, which again really has nothing to do with the county, but they're going to have more conversations in regards to, there is an interest from the school system to have a strong 7th and 8th grade region to play in. And I think that's going to sort of dictate a little bit the conversation. But there's still nothing, if the local Sertoma board decided to still stay with Sertoma, there's nothing that says that this new league can't form and have its own league. From the county's perspective, whether it be Sertoma or whether it be the new league, just before they play on Davis Field, if they're going to practice on Davis Field, or if we ever got any other fields, I'm just going to require them to, and we will check, and we will require them to have the liability insurance, the name in Alleghany County as additional insurance.
Which wouldn't be unlike any other program as far as the insurance.
The difference is, it wouldn't be different than, say, like a fairgrounds major event. We do require them to get additional insurance, name the county as additional insurer, but it is different than other, if it's something that the county runs the league in, then we don't buy our own, we already have our own liability.
Well, I think keeping in mind that we started this program, this Sertoma program, I think it was back in 2005, and it was dependent on volunteers, and that was the initial gist of it, was to have volunteers. And like you just said, over the years, I think the county probably got a little bit involved in it. I'm not saying that the county necessarily jockeyed for that, but personally, from what I've heard today and thought about, I'm not so sure that, well, I'd like to go ahead and put in a form of a motion that we adopt this, the third option of Alleghany County just excusing itself from this little football league. And that's my motion.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, a second to that motion. Additional discussion? Not all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?